All right. So, hi everyone. Welcome to the information session for the Indigenous Youth and Communities Future Fund. Please note that this session will be recorded, so feel free to turn on or off your camera as well. Just make sure that you're on mute. So, hi everyone. My name is Amanda Bernard, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Director of Indigenous Programs at Laidlaw Foundation. I'm a proud member of the Madawaska Maliseet First Nation as well. My reserve is located in New Brunswick, but I was born in Ottawa and have been in Toronto for the past 13 years. I'm also very grateful to be working at Laidlaw Foundation for the past 4 years, as it gives me the opportunity to work closer with Indigenous communities. So just a few notes before we begin. I will be sharing these PowerPoint slides with everybody at the end of the session, and there will be time for questions at the end of the presentation, but you're welcome to drop your question in the chat box, and one of my coworkers will answer them as we go along, and their name is Hyatt and Diana. If you're still unsure if you're eligible for this grant after this session, you can always reach out to me with the email that's on the slide deck, and we can always connect to discuss further. So on today's agenda, we will begin with a land acknowledgement. I will provide information about Laidlaw Foundation and the Indigenous Youth and Communities Future Fund, along with how to apply, timelines, the evaluation process. We'll discuss organizational mentors, and we'll save questions for the end. So I want to begin by recognizing that we are on the traditional territory of Indigenous peoples. We acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, and Métis peoples. This land is steeped in rich Indigenous history and continues to be home to diverse First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We understand that a land acknowledgement is only a small step towards reconciliation and healing. It is not enough to undo the historical and ongoing harm caused by systematic oppression. We commit to actively listening, learning, and engaging in meaningful conversations with Indigenous communities. We strive to amplify Indigenous voices, support their self-determination, and work towards dismantling barriers that create inequality. So Laidlaw Foundation is a private foundation based in Toronto. We recently celebrated our 75th anniversary last year in 2024. And our origins trace back to the Laidlaw family, who built their wealth through a lumber company. And in the 1940s, they sold the business to create an endowment. And today, the interest generated from that endowment allows us to provide grants that support communities. At Laidlaw Foundation, we support young people impacted by the justice, education, and child welfare system to become healthy and engaged by investing in innovative ideas, supporting system changes, and sharing learnings across the sector. This year, we renewed our strategic plan, making an important step forward. A key focus of this plan is addressing environmental racism, which we will begin to integrate into all of our work. The Indigenous Youth and Communities Future Fund is one of the many programs that we host at Laidlaw Foundation. Currently, this will be the 9th year of IYCFF, and this fund was put together to address the 94 calls of truth and reconciliation, and to act on our commitment to the Philanthropic Communities Declaration of Action. This fund is led by 6 Indigenous advisors who are located across Ontario, and they inform our operations, our knowledge building, and funding strategies. You can read more about each of the advisors on our website, or you can click the link in the slide deck, which will be sent out to you after this session. The objective of the Indigenous Youth and Communities Future Fund is to increase access to culture-based activities, participate in everyday acts of resurgence, reclamation, healing, and well-being, build relationships within and across diverse Indigenous communities and nations, and lastly, address environmental racism and promote sustainable relationships with the land and the water. So groups can apply up to $30,000. Projects need to be between 6 to 12 months, and the official start date of the project should be after June 15th, 2025, as our board meeting is in early June this year. So at Laidlaw, we're always listening to the feedback from the communities that we serve, and so therefore we have relaunched the multi-year funding for the IYCFF program. Now grantees that have successfully completed a 1-year project can apply for 2 years for a total amount of $60,000. However, it is very important that if you haven't successfully completed a one-year project with us, do not apply for two. To be eligible for this grant, the initiative must be in Ontario. The idea must come from youth and be managed by youth. This is one of our key requirements, and the advisors do notice when applications are coming from adult allies, so please keep that in mind. At Laylaw, we consider a youth to be anyone under the age of 35. The project should have at least two youth leads, which we tend to be a bit more flexible with, as long as there's just more than one person on the project. The project must align with our priorities, and it should start after June 15th, 2025. If you do have a current grant with Laidlaw, you can still apply. However, the activities need to be different from your previous grant. Lastly, we do prioritize grassroots groups and our groups located in Northern Ontario. As well, we prioritize Indigenous-led organizations versus non-Indigenous groups working with Indigenous people. An Indigenous organization is defined as having Indigenous identity at the center of the organization's programming. As well, the majority of their governance structure is held by Indigenous people, including their executive, senior, and staff level. I have included Rogers Hart's ladder of participation in this slide. So we tend to fund projects that are within rung 8 and 7. So youth-led activities in which decision-making is shared between youth and adults working as equal partners, or youth-led activities with little input from adults. So if you are an adult writing out an application for a youth group, I highly encourage you to show us somehow that the project is actually what the youth want to take on. And to do this, you can provide letters of support or even have the youth speak in videos and share the videos with us. I've also included two definitions of rural and remote areas for your consideration. So a rural area is any community with a population of 10,000 residents or less. And a remote area is any community that is located 60 minutes or more from the nearest population center. So some eligible expenses include expenses associated with the project activities or materials, salaries and honorariums, transportation, food or childcare expenses, small equipment or space rental, and a min cost should be less than 5%. Some ineligible expenses include salaries for non-youth, ongoing operating expenses, purchasing land or a building, fundraising campaigns, scholarship, direct financial support to for-profit enterprises, endowments, and any project outside of Ontario. In the past, we have funded projects such as language lessons, dog sledding, healing the land initiatives, hunting, trapping lessons, or we do fund a lot of culture camps. We've invested in opportunities for youth to create ebooks and even board games. And we also fund events that just grow relationships amongst the many diverse Indigenous communities. In 2022, we funded 25 groups, and in 2023 and 2024, we funded 24 groups. So last year, we received about 75 applications and only funded about 24. So the success rate was about 32%. To apply to this grant, you do need to submit an application using our online portal. However, if you do have limited access to the internet, we do accept offline submissions or even oral and video submissions. So I strongly encourage anyone that wants to submit a video to do so. You can upload the video within the application, or if the file is too large, you can send me the video using the website called wetransfer.com. For those that do decide to submit a video, you are not required to complete the full application. Just make sure that all the questions are being answered within the video. And those that do still submit a video, you'll still be required to submit a budget. To discuss any of these options further, you can always connect with me as well. To access the application, visit our website and click Grantee Portal on the top right-hand corner, which you can see here. So once you click that, you will be on our portal and you will either need to log in with an existing account or create a new account. And there's some guides on the right-hand side of the login screen to help you troubleshoot common issues. So the deadline for this year's call to action is March 6th at 5 p.m. So please be advised that this is a hard date, so make sure you submit your application on time. The questions of the application can be downloaded by clicking question list button on the top right corner of the screen. As well, make sure you don't forget to save your application as you go through so you don't lose anything in case there are any technical issues. Right here. So you'll see the question button list here, and then you can like save application here. And the deadline is March 6th as well. So within the application itself, you have 9 sections, which can also be found in the slide. The sections includes an information and eligibility section, the applicant information, video or oral submissions, basic information, applicant's background, project description, project details, project budget, and then the final section is the additional information. So the first section of the application is the information and eligibility questions, which you can see on the slide. These 4 questions help us and yourself determine if you are eligible for the grant. The rest of the application will only become visible if the answer is yes to the first 3 questions. For the 4th question, you will indicate whether you are a charity, a nonprofit, or a First Nation band office, or even a grassroots group. Please note that we do prioritize grassroots groups and we do not provide funds to for-profit enterprises. The second section is called the basic information. And so within this section, the applicant will answer questions such as, we use this section to evaluate and analyze the program. So in this section, you'll find questions such as, what is your name? What is your birthday? What group or nation do you belong to? How did you hear about the Indigenous Youth and Communities Future Fund? And which area does your project prioritize? In this section, you will also let us know if you're working with an OM, and I'll explain what an OM is later in the slide deck. But just keep in mind, you don't need to work with an OM to apply for this grant. However, some grantees do like their support. The applicant background section asks questions about yourself and your group. Within this section, just make sure to highlight everybody's name, age, and role that they will play within the project. It's important, very, very important to include details about which youth are involved and leading the project within the section. In this section, we're also asking folks to provide proof of their First Nation, Métis, or Inuit citizenship. This is a new requirement that was requested from our Indigenous advisors to protect our Indigenous grantees and ensure equal access. So if you do not have a copy of your status card, you can upload a letter of support from your First Nation or community, or a letter of support from an elder or an Indigenous-led organization that confirms your connection. Within the project description section, you will be required to name your project and provide us with the amount that you would like to request. You will also indicate whether you're applying for a multi-year grant or a 1-year grant. If you haven't successfully completed a 1-year grant with us, you need to select no for multi-year funding. As well, within this section, you will also be able to include your project summary, which will be shared publicly if you do receive funding, along with the project start and end date. So Laidlaw, we do recognize that Indigenous people are land-based and often timekeeping to the land. So we understand that project timelines may shift accordingly. The project details section will ask you questions regarding where the project is happening. Who will it serve, the project's goals and impacts, along with the project's activities and timelines. For the goals and impact question, applicants need to list goals and impacts that the group hopes to achieve. And the response should look somewhat like, our goal is to achieve whatever objective by whatever timeline. Accomplishing this goal will result in whatever result or benefit you're hoping for. And then you can also rephrase it such as, the change we want to see will be, mention the change, and then mention the actions that will help you get there. There's also a template within this question that will help you build out the response. So it looks something like this that you see on the screen. For the timeline question, applicants can choose to fill out the text box in the application, or they can complete one of the 2 work plan templates that Laidlaw provides. There's a link within the application that will lead users to the work plan template, which you can see on the slide as well. And once that is filled out, you can attach that work plan to the additional information section at the end of the application. So users can actually use either of these work plan templates, or you can use one that you prefer that you've created yourself, or you can just input it into the application itself. So these work plan templates are not mandatory, they're optional, but it does help grantees and applicants manage their projects. So it is something to consider. So within the application, you will also be required to submit a budget. We do advise that you use the budget template that we've provided since we tried to simplify it as much as possible. To access the template, you will need to click the link in the application, and then the template will automatically download. However, you are welcome to use any budget template that you prefer. It doesn't have to be this one, or you could just fill out the numbers directly into the application itself and not use a template. So within this budget, whether you're using ours, your own, or you're just filling out directly into the application, you just kindly make sure to include all the expenses and a short description, and the amount that you estimate will be required for that expense. The budget narrative is a way for you to explain to us how you got into that amount that you've outlined. As well, please make sure that the amount requesting adds up to the total amount of expenses. The Indigenous advisors review the math, so make sure everything adds up correctly. Double check, triple check your math, because that's an easy way for them to remove your application from the pot. Within the budget section as well, you will be asked if the project is free for participants and if your project has paid youth staff. So keep in mind that the advisors usually don't like to see projects where participants have to pay to attend. As well, we are strong believers that people should get paid for the work that they contribute. So this means make sure you pay yourself and perhaps provide honorariums for those involved. The last section is the additional information where you can submit anything else that you want us and the Indigenous advisors to see. In the past, folks have included annual reports, news articles, or previous programming that they've completed. Once again, this is all completely optional. However, I do highly, highly recommend if you are an adult filling out the application to include letters of support from youth. The last thing we want to do is to push youth to do something that they don't want to do. So make sure you show us that this is something that the youth actually want to take on. As well, last year, one of our current advisors was looking for training certificates. So although this isn't a mandatory requirement, if folks have certificates, they should include them to make their application stronger. Once you submit an application, you will receive confirmation receipts. Within that confirmation receipt, you will also find a survey about the application itself. We value your feedback and use it to improve our program, so we greatly appreciate you taking the time to complete that survey. After the due date, the Laylaw staff will review the applications for eligibility and alignment. The applications that meet our criteria will be passed to the Indigenous advisors, who will begin their review. The staff and Indigenous advisors will then meet in May to review the applications and decide which ones get funded. Then the decision will have to go back to our board of directors to approve. And then we'll inform all applicants of the decision. And if applicants have any questions after they hear back the results, they can also connect with me for further feedback. So our evaluation process includes two steps. The first is whether the application passed the general eligibility criteria. The second evaluation goes into depth of whether the project is doable and realistic, how well the group explained their expected impact, and if the project aligns with the program's overall objectives and priorities. As for timelines, the staff will review the applications in March. So the due date's March 6th, then the staff will review them, Laidlaw staff in March, then it will go to the Indigenous advisors in April, and then the Indigenous advisors will convene in May and decide which applications get funded, and that comes directly from the Indigenous youth. And then that gets approved by our board, and our board meeting is in early June, which is why the project should start after June 15th. And here's just another view of our grant timelines and the process. So typically expect a response 2 to 3 months after the due date, which is again March 6th. And before we go to the question portion, I wanted to discuss what an organizational mentor is and how they could help facilitate your project. So an OM is either a charitable organization or a First Nation band office. The OM will provide admin support, project mentoring, governance, and financial accountability to both newly incorporated and unincorporated grassroots, youth-led, or nonprofit organizations. So the term OM captures two intentions. The first one being that the OM provides a sound legal home for the project that is unincorporated. This means the OM extends their own infrastructure to support one or more projects. In doing so, the OM assumes all legal and financial responsibility for the activities of the project. As well, the OM provides admin support and oversight of the project. The other intention refers to the generous exchange of knowledge, experience, opportunities, and networks between OMs and the groups in service of a shared mandate. The OM and group leaders get to know each other, build trust, and work together in the spirit of reciprocity. When working with an OM, the grantees do get a large amount of payments upfront instead of more smaller incremental payments. As well, grantees will not be required to submit invoices or receipts when working with an OM. So once again, OMs are completely optional, but some grassroots groups tend to like their support. OMs do, some of them do charge a percentage of the total grant for their services. As well, the reporting process would have to be decided between the OM and the grantee to ensure alignment. At Law, we require that all OMs are in Ontario. As well, after I send out the slide deck, you can see a link here on the slide deck that will list a bunch of different OMs that you can potentially reach out to if you would like. So once again, completely optional, but just something to consider. Lastly, just make sure you follow our social media account at laidlaw.iycff or sign up to our mailing list to learn about upcoming events and receive highlights from our grantees. We also have 2 Instagrams, a Twitter, a Facebook, and a LinkedIn, and we post quite frequently, so make sure you follow us. And thank you for attending and listening, and I look forward to seeing all your applications come through.